Here's a highlight from a recent episode of Booked on Rock. His name is Mike Evans. He is the author of Pink Floyd Behind the Music. With Barrett as their main songwriter, they did have 2 hit singles, Arnold Lane, See Emily Play, and then the successful debut studio album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. That was all that from 1967. And this was not something that Syd embraced. There's a highlighted quote in your book where Syd said, "If John Lennon doesn't have to do Top of the Pops, why should I?" His mental decline was pretty rapid. Was it due to drugs? Was it mental illness? Was it simply an artist who rebelled against commercialism? Was it all of that combined? What do you think?
I think it's probably all of that combined. I mean, the drugs obviously didn't help, and physically they were the main influence on his mental state. The main detrimental influence on his mental state. He wasn't the first and he wasn't the last, but to have that kind of mental history. But he there was a awful, fatal, almost fatal combination of sudden fame and overindulgence. I mean, it happened to a number of rock stars, but with Syd, it was just more disastrous than with many, you know. And it was a combination of fame and, I mean, without the fame, you probably couldn't have afforded so many drugs.
Sure.
If you like to look at it that way. And also, of course, the whole scene is full of hangers-on who made all that very easy. You know, it was very accessible, and it's like it's been like that forever. You know, on the kind of music scene. But fame, it's particularly on somebody who's quite young and still feeling their own way in the world. I mean, these were just students. I mean, they were like, you know, 18, 19-year-old. They were kids, you know, comparatively speaking. And so if you couldn't quite handle that, and it happened to, you know, not just Syd Barrett, but, you know, if you couldn't handle that quite, you could spiral out of in the wrong direction, which unfortunately he did.
Yeah, there's a story. What's the talk show that they were on when Syd would, as soon as the cameras were on and they would ask Syd a question, he would go completely quiet and say nothing. And then they'd say, cut, hold on. And then they say, Syd, you just got to answer the questions a little bit. And Syd was playing with him. He's like, oh, no problem. I'll talk. Okay, let's do this again. And then they turn the camera on and he would do the same thing, shut down, not say anything.
Yeah. It's just like it was just, it became totally unreliable, especially if you're trying to handle that.
There's been stories about years later where people would knock on his door because they found out where he lived, and he would open the door sometimes and be friendly, and sometimes would say, please leave me alone. Stories that there was checks that would arrive and that he would never cash, publishing checks. Like he wanted nothing to do with the Pink Floyd past. What do you know about that? Yeah, you've heard those stories.
I've heard some. Yeah.
But he was very reclusive. Pictures of him around town, going to the art shop on his bicycle.
Yeah.
Privately. Very sad, because then people got intrusive. Pictures of him taking his trash out. You know, it's very, they try to glamorize it almost like it was this fascinating story that there was, you know, people couldn't refuse to really invest themselves into. But like Roger Waters said, it's a sad story. It's a tragic story.
There was that situation where he appeared at recording session.
Wish You Were Here. Yeah.
And they didn't recognize him at first when he came in the studio.
Let's talk a little bit more about Wish You Were Here from 1975. You write, quote, Roger Waters made it clear very early on in the process that Shine on You, Crazy Diamond, which would be the key composition on the new album, was closely related to his affectionate reflections on the band's old comrade, Syd Barrett. You did talk about it a little bit before about what happened with Syd. He showed up out of the blue one day, right? Now, Nick Mason wrote about it in his book, and he puts a picture in the book too of the day that Syd was there. So he just showed up.
It was 7 years after he left the band.
7 years, and they're literally recording a song about him, and he walks in, correct?
Yeah. Nobody knows whether it was coincidence that he happened upon the moment they were doing that particular song, or whether he just wandered in the studio and that was coincidence. or whether it's a bit of a myth and he wandered in, but that was one of the songs that they were doing. You know, it could have been uh, the myth could have been slightly manipulated, so he didn't actually walk in when they were in the middle of Crazy Diamond. But who knows? But it was certainly remarkable that he appeared at all. You know, that's the point.
They tried talking to him, right? But it really wasn't getting far. He wasn't really connected to reality at that point.
No, I mean, I'm often, I can't remember now whether Nick Mason ever mentioned how he got in there in the first place. I mean, he didn't just wander in the door, you know.
Somebody had to let him in.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's a story that he had a toothbrush in his hand. He's brushing his teeth while he's
that's
watching him
right. Yeah,
perform. He was overweight. He had shaved his head and he looked unrecognizable.
yeah.
It's a very eerie story. And again, the fact that they're recording that song, or how much of truth there is to that, but still the
It
fact
was
that he's
certainly, it
there.
was, yeah, exactly. That song came out of that session, put it
Yeah.
that way.